Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and the possibility of compassionate degrowth as a way to mitigate climate change. Many people, a lot of scientists are starting to come to the conclusion that there's probably nothing that we can do to mitigate a serious catastrophe. However, we will try to mitigate that serious catastrophe when it becomes all too apparent that we are in a very quick downward spiral, and the mass of the global population wakes up and goes, oh, there will be steps taken. People will try to do things to mitigate or to reverse or develop technologies. That's a given. That's a done. As much of a given and a done is that some people think that we have 3 to 5 years left, possibly 10. I've seen a few, there have been a few articles suggesting, and then somebody sent me a video the other day suggesting that the methane blowout or clathrate gun or the rapid release of 50 gigatons of methane isn't going to happen anytime soon, that we may have several years before that happens. All signs and all evidence points to probably not. That's probably going to happen much sooner than later, but we don't know. We don't know. Science sometimes gets it wrong. That's proven too. So if we get lucky and we hit the galactic lottery and we happen to get 10 or 20 years in which to wiggle our way out, wiggle we will. So let's try and wiggle in the right way, I guess. When governments start to do all kinds of crazy stuff in response to this, when people start to do all kinds of crazy stuff in response to this, wouldn't it be better if somebody had a plan? Wouldn't it be better if the most logical, sane minds on the planet had thought out, here's the steps, here's what you want to do, this is the safest route out of this chaos, and then try and take that route. That's all I'm suggesting. I am not suggesting that that there's a fix. I'm not suggesting that we don't have very slim chance. But if we end up taking that chance or having some time to work with, then why not do the right thing? Why not make the correct steps instead of probably people just losing their minds and doing all kinds of mayhem, setting off that small nuclear weapon, just to start a little global cooling. Because I'm sure somebody already thought that one up. Oh, who was it? Was it Paul Beckwith? I'm sure that there are some lunatics in power somewhere who have thought that one up too. I'm gonna start the night off with another blog post from Michael Campy at Way Past What the Fuck. And this is titled Cognitive Dissonance from Wednesday, January 23rd. For those of you who believe the end is approaching, it may be hard to reconcile what you see outside your door each day with the impending end of industrial civilization and all life on Earth. I still go to bed each night hoping that I'm wrong, and wake up each morning after a restless night knowing I am right. Being in a constant state of cognitive dissonance, which is defined as a situation involving conflicting attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors, such as when people smoke, behavior, and they know smoking causes cancer, cognition. I live in Southern California where, right now, I wake each day to blue skies, sometimes with puffy white or rain clouds. All around me, the world is going on as if nothing is wrong. The trees have turned to fall colors, which serves to hide the dead branches, and it just doesn't seem that bad. It reminds me of the time when my mother died. The overwhelming feeling of grief and loss was not shared by the general population. They had no idea what we were going through. The stores were crowded. People were dropping their kids off at school and driving to work. No one was concerned with my dead mother. That is what it feels like to be a doomer. Business as usual while we watch the world burn. My local newspaper had a headline that read, "Fun times ahead." It was all about the fun things you had to look forward to in the coming year. Fun times indeed. This type of mindless, consistently reinforced behavior, I am convinced, will continue right up to the end when the catastrophe can no longer be ignored by even the most ignorant of us. Want some fun times? How about an e-ticket ride to hell? That will be fun times. In his article, "The World Will End in Fire," David Swanson said, "Those living in some fortunate inland suburb will not have the benefit of a lengthy warning in the form of direct impact. They can only warn themselves by caring about what's happening in other places ravaged by drought and flooding and storms and heat. Rather than sitting in a mythical warming pot alongside the poor slandered frog who actually knows better, people are on the comfortable stovetop next to the pot, about to be engulfed as the pot boils over. We are approaching a perfect storm of catastrophic events, biosphere collapse, economic collapse, and a possible war. Yet here I am looking at the snow-covered San Gabriel Mountains, going to work, pretending that things are not as bad as they are. It is, however, only pretending, because I cannot pretend anymore. I have to put on the pretender mask when I deal with clients, the apparently intelligent and store clerks who insist on asking, 'How are you today?' I have nothing that will fit in the allowable time frame as a response. I have begun to say, 'I'm not sure yet. Can I get back to you on that?' This is the best I can do, as something like, 'Well, considering that we'll all be dead or dying in a few years, I'm doing remarkably well. Thanks for asking.' I tried that once and it was not well received. There are, right at this moment, no obvious signs in my neighborhood of what is happening to the planet. There are no starving people, empty grocery stores, hurricanes, dead animals falling from the skies, or any of the myriad items that I can see on Facebook groups or YouTube channels. There is, however, an overwhelming amount of scientific information about the coming collapse. There are reports of rapidly diminishing sea ice in the Arctic and the degradation of the Greenland ice sheet. There are stories about the ongoing heat wave in Australia and unprecedented cold on other parts of the planet, but here, the skies are blue and the weather is a comfortable 70+ degrees. What I find to be problematic about this is that I know what is happening, and even knowing, I sometimes can't believe it. It makes me look upon the clueless masses in a somewhat more sympathetic light. If I can't believe it, then how can I realistically expect anyone else to believe it? If I had a talk with my friend Kirk, I had a talk with my friend Kirk, and he told me years ago that life would be so much easier if I could just close my eyes like the rest of humanity, if I could just move along as though there were no problems. But I can't. Mark Twain said, "A lie is as good as the truth if you can get someone to believe it." The general population has bought this lie hook, line, and sinker, and that lie is good enough for them. It is, to them, a reality they can sink their teeth into, something to hold on to as we make our merry way toward the hell that is coming, kind of like faith. Having faith either in some guy in the sky or in a technological fix for the problems that face us may very well become the drug of the future. Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World about someone who takes the drug soma, "I don't understand anything," she said with decision, determined to preserve her incomprehension intact. "Nothing." She continued in another tone, "Why don't you take soma when you have these dreadful ideas of yours? You'd forget all about them, and instead of feeling miserable, you'd be jolly, so jolly. All I can say is, so tell me, punk, are you feeling jolly?" Chris Martenson said in his article, "Collapse is Already Here," that the early stages of collapse cause people to cling even tighter to the status quo. Instead of panic in the streets, we simply see more of the same as those in power do all they can to remain so, while the majority of the public attempts to ignore the growing problems for as long as it possibly can. And as the timer ticks down for us, the more obvious aspects of the deception will become ever more apparent. People will remain oblivious for as long as possible, like clinging to a life preserver in the middle of the ocean. Even as what they believe goes up in smoke, at a certain time in the future it will fall on us, the few, the proud, the doomed, to shepherd the unbelievers through the door to the truth. They will not come willingly. It will be like trying to shove a cat backward through a pipe. I have never tried this, but cats evidently don't like to go backwards, and they don't like to be shoved through pipes. So as we ride off into the burning sphere, all that is left is crisis. What crisis? La, 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 la. Excellent stuff. Once again, hope you all enjoyed that. Cognitive dissonance, indeed. That is exactly what it's like to realize what's going on and nobody else seems to pay attention. Or then maybe they know what's going on and they're just ignoring it. They're doing a really good job of acting. Sometimes I think that's what's happening. It's like everybody knows. Everybody realizes that we're in deep, deep doo-doo, and they're just driving around like, well, you know, let's just act like nothing's wrong. Amazing. Moving on to this article from Counterpunch. I wanted to real quickly, I keep forgetting to thank you guys for many of the articles that I read, I get from viewers in the comment sections or in emails. And thank you all for continuing to keep me well stocked in information and articles. There is no shortage of things to read or things to look at, or I mean, I've got an endless supply, but you know, I read a majority of the articles I read are from the comment section or from viewers. So thank you so much for sending them to me and keeping me alerted of things that I wouldn't be able to see with my own, very own eyeballs, because I can't see everything, man. I try to look, but I can't see. This is from February 1st. That's today. Democrats Killed the Green New Deal by Rob Urey. Environmental activists received a reality check when newly empowered Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives pushed aside demands for an environmental economic transition program, a Green New Deal, in favor of reviving a toothless committee to study the problem. A transition program is needed to mitigate the economic dislocations that will result from resolving the multiple environmental crises currently underway. The move by Democrats virtually guarantees that the political support needed to move such a transition forward will be undermined by the day-to-day needs of the economically precarious majority. Recent evidence in this direction comes from the French Gilets jaunes, or Yellow Vests, whose rebellion allegedly began in response to an environmental gasoline tax. The rebellion was opportunistically framed as against environmental resolution rather than who pays for it. 4 decades of neoliberal economic policies have exacerbated class tensions as well as environmental destruction, leaving a large precariat that neither can nor should pay for environmental resolution. Given the distribution of the spoils, it is more than reasonable to force the cleanup costs on those who, 1, caused the problem, and 2, benefited from its creation. In this sense, a government-funded program of resolution is the best the rich could hope for. Framed as economic stimulus, a New Deal that funds a transition to less immediately destructive economic production, excuse me. Where am I? Any such program could be shifted toward mitigating economic calamity for hundreds of millions of people as a scale of the retrenchment needed to avoid full-on environmental crisis becomes evident. Green growth is either cover for planned degrowth or evidence that environmental resolution has been subverted. Planned degrowth, did you hear that? Green, that would be green growth. That would be actual reality. Realistically, green growth would be planned degrowth. By creating federal resources to fund the program, both the oligarchs and the broad precariat could, in theory, benefit from environmental resolution without having to bear the cost. But the oligarchs and their servants in government understand that real environmental resolution will mean the end of industrialism and with it the source of their power. Bing, bang, boom. This, rather than the short and intermediate term costs, explains establishment resistance to effective environmental programs. Existing economic relations are based on producing goods that are dissociable from their environmental harms. Internalizing these harms as costs, either through mitigation or foregoing production, would bring the struggle over who bears them to the fore. Because federal expenditures would relieve oligarchs of the cost of doing so. The real battle is over the future of Western political economy. From the inside, environmental consequences are an afterthought. Given recent history, the most likely outcome of such a program would be Obamacare for the environment, an amalgam of giveaways to corporate interests that produces a modest to ambiguous result for its intended beneficiaries while further empowering corporations to control future outcomes. The rush by establishment powers to kill it supports the thesis that oligarchs and corporate interests are willing to forego milking the polity in the present to perpetuate predatory and exploitive economic relations capitalism going forward. Ding, ding, ding. However, favoring the long game in this case means either one, leaving impending environmental calamity unaddressed. That's most, yes. Two, having oligarchs and corporations determine the goals of the Green New Deal as well as the means of achieving them, in which case, C1 above. Or three, social upheaval that overturns existing political relationships with unknown outcomes going forward. Given the evidence to date, it appears that only three holds promise for achieving needed environmental outcomes. Enter Gilets jaunes, or Extinction Rebellion. The success of environmental resolution will depend on its breadth. When global warming is considered in association with the sixth mass extinction, oceanic dead zones, depleted fisheries, and increasingly toxic air and water, it is the process of industrialization that produces unity through causation. Together, they illustrate a fundamental flaw in industrial logic. Its full consequences are only known in retrospect after its harms have aggregated. Addressing the preponderance of environmental destruction at once is needed to preclude sequential solutions that leave broad causal mechanisms in place. Industrialism has a demonstrated record of producing unexpected environmental calamities, e.g. global warming and mass extinction. Known toxic products and processes have been serially replaced with unknown toxic products and processes until their toxicity becomes known. Since the 1970s, ad hoc reforms have reduced individual toxicities, e.g. auto emissions, while perpetuating their overall growth. In contrast, in focused analysis like the recent IPCC report on climate change, reduction in the absolute rather than relative levels of greenhouse gas emissions is needed to prevent catastrophic consequences. Ad hoc solutions proceed from relative logic. The window for tweaks was closed several decades ago. Given the rapid spread of industrialism in recent decades, net retrenchment means a radical reorientation of seemingly unstoppable forces. However, regularly recurring crises of capitalism like 2006 through 2017 offer an insertion point where one, well-conceived, and two, already existing programs could replace guarantees and bailouts for the rich and powerful to decisively reorient the trajectory of Western political economy. Environmental solutions designed by economists like cap and trade and carbon taxes are both inadequate and easily gamed. Cap and trade has existed in Europe for decades as an insider game for financial traders. Carbon taxes require knowledge of environmental costs that will only be known decades from now to be adequately priced, and perennial assurances of robust enforcement are undermined by corporate control over enforcement mechanisms. The move by House Democrats to kill the new Green New Deal, while thoroughly predictable, illustrates this political conundrum at work. The rich control the American political system, and they are rich in large measure because they have been able to force the environmental consequences of industrial production onto everyone but themselves. Environmental resolution is about rebalancing social power. One of the things it's about. Environmental destruction is, in this sense, an aspect of class warfare on many, many levels, yes. Because who is it that actually pollutes the most? Well, it's the rich and the industrialists and all of the entities that back up and feed the rich and the industrialists, and also the military. We can add that in there too. A program of environmental resolution threatens this system in two ways. In the first, were the rich forced to bear the cost of production, including pollution, they would no longer be rich. And the second, if industrial products can't be cleanly produced, most can't, then their production should be ended. Yes, yes, yes. Either way, any effective program of environmental resolution will produce a redistribution of economic power. Lest this read like class warfare, we, the breadth of humanity, neither ask for these relations, nor are we their intended beneficiaries. This explains in part why the Green New Deal, as it was originally proposed, second link from the top, was cleverly conceived, and why political functionaries of both parties will oppose it with all their might. Dumping environmental harms onto those who lack the social power to resist them is both the source of concentrated economic power and its expression. Ending this power, as well as the wealth that accrues from it, is to redistribute it downward. Not useful here is the myth that capitalism is necessary to filling basic human needs. The neoliberal push to open new markets has been driven by capitalists and their agents, not by those on whom those markets are being imposed. For instance, it was the Chinese political leadership that decided to build an export-driven economy in recent decades, not the citizenry. Development of an internal consumer economy in China will likewise be imposed from above. Of relevance is that the instantiated logic that we, the breadth of humanity, need capitalism is more accurately stated as capitalists need us. Ooh. Understanding of the social direction here, that capitalists create demand for their products, they don't respond to it, was relatively mainstreamed in the 1960s. The Keynesian practice of demand management was subsequently used to conflate manufactured dependencies with the neoliberal fantasy of self-organized economies. The green growth crowd proceeds from the same logic. Unemployment is socially destructive because of manufactured dependencies that produce a cascade of negative economic consequences when interrupted. These dependencies are functionally arbitrary outside of the role they play in capitalist social relations. The means to provide for the human needs of the dispossessed has for centuries now been nestled in the pockets of the rich. Green growth naturalizes these dependencies to pose them as the only road to economic salvation for most people. Again, consumer societies are the result of state planning in the service of the rich and powerful. Who is it? Who wrote this again? Hold on. Rob Urey. This is an excellent article. I'm just going to interject that. Hold on. Let's get back down here. Again, consumer societies are the result of state planning in the service of the rich and the powerful, not economic self-organization as capitalist fantasy poses it. Boom, bam, bip. The resources needed to manage a transition away from them can either come from the rich or the state. The New Deal saw the state pay. A Green New Deal could as well. The insight that the imposition of market relations around the globe hasn't resulted in an upsurge in democracy illustrates this contorted logic at work. How democratic is it to impose market relations on people? Trade deals like NAFTA and the TPP were conceived by oligarchs, negotiated by corporate agents, and they are imposed using state power. They are antithetical to any meaningful concept of democracy. Indeed, the TPP was determined to usurp state power in favor of corporate power. Basically, corporations would have more power than individual nation states, which is about as insane as any other concept. So most citizens want environmental resolution. Economic justice and the basic services of civil society like education, healthcare, and retirement security. The state is an available vehicle for providing these through the power of the federal purse. Federal expenditures would mean that resources would not only be taken from those who have them, the rich, and yet the rich and the leadership of the American political establishment are shouting no to a Green New Deal. This refusal illustrates the stakes. Back in the realm of establishment politics, the ability to collect political donations determines standing. Structurally, this politics mirrors the distribution of economic power. The hierarchy in both parties is determined through the quantum of legal bribes accumulated. This ties success in politics to the existing economic order. Political investment were upended by forcing the cost of environmental resolution back onto producers. The political hierarchy that mirrors it would be upended. Hence, The first order of business for the Democratic Party leadership upon its return from years in the political wilderness was to lay the Green New Deal to rest. The time-tested strategy for doing so was to provide lip service in support of environmental resolution while using procedural means such as PAYGO. Anybody know what's happening with PAYGO? Do y'all know what that is? It's basically saying that you can't pass resolutions that cost money without offsetting the cost of it by cutting something else, which is ridiculous because we create money for the military. We create money, whenever we need it for something, emergencies, whatever. We create money that we send to other countries like Israel and Saudi Arabia. We just create it. But, so PAYGO is a scam. To subvert programs that do so. Through PAYGO, insurgent Democrats will be forced to cut spending, inflict economic pain on the powerless elsewhere to fund environmental resolution. Sound like something already done in, say, France? Here, Matt Stoller tries to put a benign face on PAYGO before reluctantly concluding that the Democratic leadership is more likely than not acting in bad faith with the measure. The fiscal mechanisms that would allow the federal government to pay for a Green New Deal, not grain, are explained here. With MMT, modern monetary theory, becoming the received wisdom in commenting circles, if not yet the more poorly lit crevasses and highway rest stops of official power, claims that there are no funds for environmental resolution are losing their plausibility. This is the likely rationale for recent assertions that raising marginal tax rates on the rich could pay for the program. The larger issue remains that corporate profits and the wealth held by oligarchs are the wages of environmental destruction. Depending on how these are calculated, the net benefit of 3 centuries of capitalist production might easily have a giant minus sign in front of it. In this light, the insurgent Democrats offer to have the federal government fund environmental resolution seems incredibly generous. If the potential for upending existing power relations that make it contentious, it is the potential for upending existing power relations that make it contentious. The American political establishment has no intention of moving a real program of environmental resolution forward. Doing so would end its hold on power. My suggestion is to organize citizen experts to craft a program outside of official channels in anticipation of another capitalist crisis. A combination of political insistence and official incapacitation could yield the political moment needed to insert the program into the frame of the state ahead of the capitalist response. Good stuff. Bravo, Rob Urey. I really like that article a lot, which is what I was just saying, that somebody, the best and the brightest outside of the government and outside of capitalists, outside of think tanks and corporate, outside of corporate control should, gather together, the Noam Chomskys and the Chris Hedges and whoever else, and the Abby Martins and the, all the climate scientists that are, worth anything, that they all gather together and say, how do we do this? What's the plan? Here's what the plan looks like. Here's what's needed, have it already ready to go. The way that AOC is just straight out of the gate, saying we need to do this and we need to do this and we need to do this and we need to have a 70% tax rate on the wealthy. She gets it. She knows what needs to be done. She's not afraid to say it. And everybody's like, how dare you simmer down? We can't have any of this craziness, this absolute communist insanity running the halls of government, telling people they can have a Green New Deal and tax the rich. Oh my God. So quickly, I'm going to just talk about this other article before I leave for the evening. Proudhon, I think, was the one that linked this in the comments. This is a very interesting study. I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to talk about it very briefly. The idea of it is The headline is Demise of Indigenous People During the Colonization of America Cooled the Earth. So what they're saying is that the wiping out of I think it was, what's the number, 50 million indigenous people created the mini ice age, or the little ice age that happened about 300 to 500 years ago. What they're saying is because these people were practicing agriculture, and so wiping out this many people returned a bunch of fields to wilderness, and in doing so sucked up a bunch of carbon out of the atmosphere and created a big cooling event. Very interesting idea, interesting concept. And it's not long. I'm going to link it below. Why don't I just read it? It's not long. European colonization of the Americas contributed to the advent of the 17th century Little Ice Age, a new study says. As some 55 million indigenous people were wiped out, their farmland turned into forest and sucked out CO2. That's the premise. Much of the continental U.S. may feel like it's living through a mini ice age due to the polar vortex weather pattern, but while this will come and go, there was a proper global drop in temperatures about 4 centuries ago, which is commonly called the Little Ice Age. A team of scientists from the University College London said that humans were partially to blame for it, particularly Europeans traveling to the New World for treasure and new life. Treasure. While there were some natural reasons behind the oddball phenomenon, much of it remains veiled in mystery. The British researchers argue that they have found a missing link, the great dying of indigenous people as a result of the European conquest. The scientists found that some 56 million hectares of land were abandoned by the native population of the Americas as they fled or died due to epidemics, war, slavery, and subsequent famine. Those lands were reclaimed by forests that, in turn, absorbed so much carbon dioxide that the process cooled Earth. The resulting terrestrial carbon uptake had a detectable impact on both atmospheric CO2 and global surface air temperatures in the 2 centuries prior to the Industrial Revolution, according to the study published in Quaternary Science Reviews. Wow. So that's that. That's the basic idea of it. I'm going to link it below. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Do remember to check if you are subscribed to the channel. They do unsubscribe people from time to time. That happens. Yeah, you know, like the video if you like it. Leave a comment if you are so moved to do so. Until next time, peace.